35 years ago, Photoshop changed the world. And for me, it changed everything as well. But if it hadn't been for my friend Jared, I might not even be sitting here talking about Photoshop at all. See, Jared was one of my best friends growing up. He was the guy who introduced me to computers, to design, to Photoshop itself. I had no clue what I was doing. But Jared, he'd been using Photoshop for a while, before I'd even heard of it. We started on version 2.5, which, believe it or not, didn't even have layers. We had to get creative. We used multiple files and selection tricks to build what we thought was really cool art. In reality, it was clunky and it was messy, but it was magic to us. Photoshop wasn't just a tool. It was a playground, a place where creativity had no rules and no limits. But my love for computers didn't just connect me with Jared, it also deepened my connection with my dad. In the mid-90s, he brought home our first family computer, and with it, a scanner that came bundled with Photoshop 3.0. Now, I had layers. Suddenly, I could stack, edit, and manipulate multiple images in ways that weren't possible before. It was like stepping into a whole new world. That computer became my escape, my canvas, and my obsession. I spent hours experimenting, pushing every button in Photoshop just to see what it would do. What started as a hobby quickly turned into a passion, and before I knew it, Photoshop was shaping the direction of my whole life. But life happens, and after high school, Jared and I lost touch, unfortunately. I went off to college, started working, and my world got bigger. But Photoshop never left my side. I took my first photography course, and that's when I really started to understand what it could do. Color correction, retouching, compositing. Every new version of Photoshop felt like unlocking a new level of creative power. In 2005, right before he passed away, I did get to see Jared again. After all those years, we finally reconnected, and it was like no time had passed. We talked about the old days, about how those long nights experimenting in his attic, and even then I got to tell him about my early ideas for sharing Photoshop stuff online. He smiled, because he was always my teacher, and I think he was a little excited that I wanted to teach other people too. It was so great to see my old friend that day. And even though he never got to see me publish my first article or create my first Photoshop course or land here at Adobe, I'd like to think that he'd be proud. Since that day, I've continued to marvel at what Photoshop can do. I'll never forget how blown away I was when Photoshop CS2 introduced smart objects. Finally, we could edit non-destructively. Then came CS3's smart filters and the quick selection tool, and masking and selections got a lot easier. And then CS5 dropped content-aware fill, and it was like Photoshop could read your mind. That single feature was magical. And looking back, it laid the foundation for all this generative AI stuff that we're so obsessed with today. You know, my parents have always been fascinated by the work I do, even if they don't fully understand it. From the very beginning, they encouraged my creativity, whether it was my dad bringing home that first computer or my mom supporting my endless hours of experimenting when I probably should have been cleaning my room. When I first started making graphics, they were there to cheer me on. When I got into photography, they wanted to see what I was shooting. And even now, all these years later, Adobe is still part of that connective tissue of our relationship. They ask about my projects, they watch my videos, they get excited when they see Adobe mentioned anywhere. It means a lot to have that kind of support, and I love that Photoshop, that thing that shaped my career, has also been something that's helped keep us connected. So today, on Photoshop's 35th anniversary, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to Photoshop for opening up a world of creativity. Thank you to the team at Adobe for continuing to push the boundaries of what's possible. Thanks to my parents for supporting me through this incredibly crazy journey. And most of all, thank you to Jared. Thanks for opening up that door for me to begin with. Here's to 35 more years of Photoshop magic. And if you've got a Photoshop story, please drop it in the comments, because I'd love to hear it.